75 days ago, I turned this 13-ounce bottle into a tilted Iwagumi-inspired moss terrarium. There were several mistakes along the way that almost caused it to crash and fail entirely. Thankfully, I was able to save it, so join me for this build and see where we are today, and I will let you know what I did wrong, what I did right, and what I did to save this from ultimately failing. As always, the first thing we do is sterilize our bottle and ingredients. Because this is a cylindrical bottle, I also adhered a bottle cap opener to be a slanted base because I thought it would be funny. However, this wasn't as good of a base as I thought it would be, so it fell over several times during its construction and cleaning it at the end for photos. I ended up adhering both the bottle and the bottle cap opener to a piece of wood, which honestly I should have done from the beginning so that it would have had 3 points of contact. The primary mistake that I made was giving up on the substrate barrier and mixing the substrate and drainage gravel. This was a terrible decision and almost crashed the entire terrarium. In fact, I only recently got over dealing with the ramifications of this. What happened is the waterlogging of the soil caused it to go anaerobic, which is very, very bad. This has only happened in one of my terrariums before, and it's quite annoying to deal with. In order to fix this problem, I pretty much had to let the terrarium dry out over an extended period of time. I did this by removing some of the rocks, leaving it open, and letting it kind of air out, but I couldn't do this all at once since obviously the springtails would escape. The next mistake that I made was with plant selection. Although this is primarily moss, which we'll get into in a moment, using arid plants in a humid environment doesn't always work. I've gotten it to work in other setups, however, they tend to be much larger setups with more mature and established plants, even of these exact same species. So, yeah, don't do that. With respect to the moss, I live in the desert, so although the species that I used, which was 3 separate species, do well in these closed setups, they hadn't fully acclimated yet. Now my moss cultures are used to it, so I have a much higher success rate. However, specifically the silver green Bryum moss almost died out, and I had to replace some of it. Some of the original spots are coming back, which is quite nice. However, I do dislike that there's some, dead space or negative space within the terrarium as it currently stands, even though they are growing back. One thing that's kind of nice, though, is that it started to grow out into other areas that I didn't place it in. So that's actually really cool, and it creates this kind of like grass effect. Because they weren't doing so hot, I did take those 2 arid plants out and move them to a different setup. However, another mistake that I made would be with the sterilization of the soil. I thought I did it long enough in the oven. However, I got 2 random blades of grass, which honestly I don't mind too much. The roots do help, add some aeration into the soil. I will eventually trim them out, but for the time being, I like how they look. I'm really happy with my hardscape selection. Although the stones look kind of plain when they're dry, now that they're in a mostly moist environment all the time, they actually look pretty cool, and there's some nice colors that pop on them. Looks a lot better in person, obviously. I record on my phone, so you get what you get in terms of video quality, but I'm pretty happy with it. I have a lot of other stones like that I'm waiting to use on other projects. As is to be expected with all sideways bottle builds, it is a little annoying to clean. Like, let me just be real with you here. Cleaning sucks, even with the appropriate curved tweezers. But, you get what you pay for, and I paid 0. So it's fun. But I really do recommend that you try and build one of these. However, don't let your hubris get as big as mine. If Serpa Design says that these tilted bottles are expert mode, and then you look at his builds, and they're pretty juvenile compared to his more intricate ones, there's a reason for that. Don't drink in terrarium. I did, and I paid the price. Despite the problems that I faced building and maintaining this terrarium, I'm really glad that I did. It helped me increase my skills, and I have subsequently made harder builds, some on this channel, some elsewhere, including astronomically smaller bottles, and I have other ones planned too. I get a lot of pleasure out of doing intentionally difficult things. And just to reiterate, this cost $0. Technically, what, like 3 cents for the amount of super glue used. The bottle cap opener was left over. The bottle itself was a leftover. I had to clean it too, so I guess okay, 1 cent for some rubbing alcohol. And the moss is just stuff that I harvested and cultivated. It's really fun. I strongly recommend you try it. So, here we are today. As stated, the silver green Brian moss has pretty much taken over the front, including in places I didn't plant it, which is pretty nice. You definitely want to mix up where you're planting things for textural reasons, but you also kind of want to envision what it's going to look like when it's done so that it looks nice and it looks how you want, but the moss will grow where it wants to grow. The thread moss, as you can see, is starting to grow pretty well, and definitely not as well as it would have had it not gone anaerobic. And it's just going to go where it wants. It grows very fast compared to other some species of moss. The silver green Brian moss did kind of die out in some places. However, it is coming back on those dead patches. It doesn't show the best because it's pretty dark, and then with the dark patch directly behind it, it doesn't pop as well as I would have liked. But I'm fairly confident that it's going to come back. A little bit of the cushion moss there in the back is coming back as well. I really like that. It might be hair cap, might be cushion. I'm not 100% certain, because this is stuff that I sourced out from outside and cultivated myself. So if you have the opportunity, it's not that bad of a deal to buy it off of someone so that you can, know what you have 100% and make sure that it's one that's going to look the way you want, grow the way you want, acclimate well. But like I said, I do this shit super cheap on purpose so that you can too. The grass is, an enigma to me since I did sterilize it, but I like it for the time being. If it gets much longer, I am going to trim it back. But as I said earlier, I kind of like that the roots are helping to break up the soil a little bit. And now that it's, long since been over anaerobic, it is growing back quite well. So I'm pretty happy with that. The rocks look really cool. The glass is always dirty, no matter how often I clean it. The springtails and nematodes just go and make it dirty again. And it's annoying to clean. It really is. So, like I said earlier, I really hope you try something like this. And if not, well, you should. So, grab some moss, grab some coffee, and definitely not something stiffer for a tilted bottle, and get on scaping.